I want to welcome you to Pastor Blast. Today is Tuesday, August 6th. In recent weeks, our congregation has lost three great saints, Bob Ayer, Dennis Coleman, and Anita. And I want you to think of this as All Saints Tuesday in August, kind of like Christmas in July. And we do well to pause and consider their life, their faith, and the impact of these three. Many of you may not know them. Maybe they're anonymous to you. The reason that we lift up lives like this, just like we do on All Saints Sunday in November, is to realize that God's grace in heaven, I guess, resides, it presents, and it makes itself known to us through these very human persons. Think of the saints as like walking, talking sacraments. And Bob, Dennis, and Anita are stellar examples of this mystery. Bob Ayer was a man of precision, perseverance, and spirituality. He would take his time. There was attention to detail, and he had so many interests. Fishing, he was a Boy Scout leader. He was also a gardener, crossword, cross-stitch, as well as a mountaineer. And he's a guy who about perseverance. He was married to Mona for almost 74 years. He worked for the Boeing Company in finance for 40 years. And he's been a member at First Lutheran in West Seattle for 7 years. He's always been an associate member. He and Mona have been here at PLC. Well, at 90, like 7 years ago, I asked him to do a temple talk. And it was to be on stewardship. And I remember him sharing about when he first went to church, he would just dump his spare change into the offering. Then he had a conversation with Mona and the pastor, and soon he was giving 10%, understanding that's part of our responsibility as believers. He was a very soft-spoken man, but when he spoke, you listened. There was wisdom, there was substance, and there was this knowing there was going to be something to learn. I will say he and Mona are about the most spiritual couple I've ever known. They both have their own copy of the LBW, the Lutheran Book of Worship, his and her copies, and they would pray together, they would sing hymns together, and when I'd come over to have communion, they knew the liturgy better than I did. Anyway, just a faithful man to his family, to Mona, such care and consideration, bringing her meals, and to the churches he loved, and especially to Jesus. And you know, he was engaged and curious all of his life. All 97 years, he was engaged in the world. Dennis, many of you probably know better, a man of humor and grace, compassionate. He was larger than life. And I loved him because he was at home in the world, just like he was at home in his own skin. And he was jovial, and he was our drummer. But you may not know that he was quite a dancer. He and Kathy have it on their tombstone where they're dancing together. He grew up in Eatonville, and he's always loved hard work. He used to buck hay. He loved the outdoors, and he's got lifelong friends there. When he was in the hospital at the end, a couple of them made the trek over here. Anyway, so then he met the beautiful Irish girl named Kathy. And up to then, Dennis, who's had this wonderful voice, was a radio. He was DJ Coleman. I used to tell him I would listen to his telephone message just to inspire and encourage me. He had this great voice, and it always ended with, "Have a great day." Well, anyway, so he had to get a job because being the DJ wasn't going to pay the bills with the kids coming. So he became a teamster. And he was a truck driver and kind of a missionary in that setting. But he really found his niche, his ministry, when he was a bus driver for Kitsap Transit. And he did that for 26 years. He was so much more than a bus driver, though. He's a tour guide, pointing out spots of places of interest. He would have trivia contests on the bus, welcoming hard-working people that are up early or headed home late. And sometimes he had to deal with some pretty dicey situations. He told me about a guy who came on board with a knife, and he had to kind of work his way through that. His memorial is going to be on August 11th, and we so miss Dennis. Anita, you probably heard the name. First of all, she was the preschool teacher here for 26 years. And she tells me at one point they had 100 students total. Isn't that something? She was also kind of the godmother of PLC music and the choir. She grew up in Skagit Valley, and she married an intrepid newspaper reporter, so she moved around a bit till they landed here in Gig Harbor, and they've got 4 kids. And like I said, she led the preschool for 26 years, had a remarkable memory for people and children. Bob Shamblin, one of our members now, said he recognized her and went over to talk to her, and she actually remembered Bob's name. His kids had been in preschool like 25 years earlier. But she was best known here at PLC the way that she would keep the archives for the choir and the choir music. I always thought of her as being the first mate when Nate Sears was our music director, you know, the second in command. It was everybody, we all had to answer to Anita. And she was a faithful and resilient soul. When she would come to worship and she couldn't get to the rail, she would hold up her hand to make sure that I would bring communion out to her. I just loved that about her. Well, in the last couple of years, she wasn't even able to get out of bed, and she was determined to die in her own home, and she did that. Took a long time. She flunked out of hospice twice, her daughters would say. But as I said, such a resilient soul. And when our live stream back in the day when we were just getting started, it was pretty dicey week to week. And when she couldn't get our live stream, then she would pull out one of her videotapes. She's got more videotapes and hymnals than anyone I've ever met. And she would pop in like the greatest hits of Peninsula Lutheran back when the 70s and the 80s, and pop that in and watch that. Well, her memorial is November 2nd. Very appropriate. It's the day before All Saints Sunday. And the plan is she's going to have like 16 hymns when she does that. Well, we're really going to miss these saints. We're richer for having them as a part of our congregation. And again, they're just signs of God's grace in the world. Sometimes we look heavenward looking for a sign from God when they're walking, talking right around here in our own congregation. Amen.